of Kent, but in my spare time, I volunteer with the Leafline Trails Coalition. I'm going to start by saying there's a QR code you're going to see up here on the screen. It's pretty important. We're going to ask you a series of questions through the presentation, kind of an interactive piece. If you go to that QR code, it's going to pull up a website that's going to prompt you with some polling questions, and then it'll allow us to kind of real-time give back to you what you're saying to us through those polls. So it's kind of a way to see what other people in the room think and to get some feedback and interactive in the afternoon. We're near the end of the day, so that helps a lot too. So again, I'm Terry Youngman, and then I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and then the mic will come back to me, and I'll get us started.
Thanks. Hi folks, my name is Claire Martini. I serve as the project manager with Leafline Trails Coalition.
Haley Bry, Leafline volunteer, and I work at Parametrics as a transit and active transportation planner.
Hi, I'm Gabriel Avilamooney. I'm a community engagement project manager with King County Parks.
All right, great. So we're here today to talk a little bit about a map vision that we've created over the course of the last year, but we kind of worked on it through the course of the last 3 years or so, and how that map vision really connects communities together. So walking through our points here, there's going to be a discussion of how we developed the coalition, what the power of a shared vision does and what it means for the coalition, how it brings us together and connects our communities. We're going to talk through some of the nitty-gritty of data coordination and the mapping process. How did we go from basically having no data at all to building a map vision that includes a 4-county region? And then now that we have this map, what are we doing to put that vision into action and what it means for practical applications in the field and with each of the jurisdictions who manage these trails. And then we'll have a little bit of time for Q&A at the end. Okay, so why are trails important? We've probably heard this a lot through the course of this conference, but these are the goals that we as a Leafline Trails Coalition find important. And this has kind of been talked about through coalition membership meetings and really coming together around these 4 principles. So the idea of public health and equity, transportation, trails as a form of transportation is very important. They're also a catalyst for economic development, and then there's very clear environmental benefits and community applications of trails. And so this is kind of what we've centered ourselves around, and it really guides the work that we do. This is a graphic that shows what we are. We are a coalition that represents 4 counties, King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap. And this is just a quick snapshot of the trails that live within the Leafline Coalition. We were formed back in 2019, is kind of whenever we first got started, and we've been building this coalition ever since. So this is our first prompt question, so if you can pull your phones back out, it should prompt you with this question of where do you primarily live and or work. So we're just trying to get a sense of where people are coming from that are here in the room today. So we'll just give it a few minutes.
And if you missed the QR code, you can go to menti.com and enter the code 26665074. 26665074. It's listed in kind of small print at the top of the slide.
Are you sure those aren't lottery numbers?
Haley suggests using it as your next lottery number if you're so inclined.
So we'll just give folks a minute here to punch in their answer.
You know what? I think I need to tell it to check again. So give me just one moment here to make it update. I don't know if it's going to work.
Well, sometimes you try new things and they don't always work out. We do these a lot. If you've come to any of our Leafline meetings, we use these a lot. It's kind of a fun way to see where people are coming from and what their interests are, but that's okay. If it's not going to work, that's all right.
It worked this morning. We could do a show of hands, just like you
Yeah.
from the Puget Sound region.
Yeah.
How about elsewhere in Western Washington? Central Washington? Eastern Washington? Not from Washington? Awesome, thank you.
Great. I kind of like the analog approach.
Yes, we could just do that.
It's good. Let's just go with that. Okay. So, who is our membership? Who is the Leafline Trails Coalition? Our membership represents nonprofit organizations. There's a heavy amount of government involved in it. We have community members that are just individuals who join our membership, and then we are bringing businesses into the conversation as well. So it's a good mix of people who are coming to the table and being part of the coalition and participating in these conversations. So if I'm going to go to the next slide. And then, yeah, so let's do show of hands for this one too. So what best describes your affiliation coming to this conference? Government? Okay. Business? Great. Nonprofit organizations? Great. And then community members, just individuals? Fantastic. And then we wanted to get a sense of who here is already a member of the Leafline Coalition. So if you're a member of the Leafline Coalition right now, can you raise your hand? Great. Either one. Okay, fantastic. And then I'm going to assume the rest of you are not, or is anybody who's not sure about whether or not they're a member? Okay, could be. And I think we're here to say we are open to membership. We would love for people to come and talk to us about being a part of the Leafline Coalition. We'd love for you to engage in our conversations and be part of our meetings and that sort of thing. You know, both from just a simple membership perspective, if you're representing an organization or a governmental entity or anything like that, there's a lot of information on our website about how to become a member, or if you're interested in being a funding partner. This is a list of our membership as it stands today. There's a lot of city partnership, regional and county government are part of it, nonprofit business. Those that are in bold are funders of the coalition, so they're making some contribution to the Leafline Coalition. And then I just wanted to make a special shout out to our fiscal sponsor, which is the Seattle Parks Foundation. So again, if you're interested in becoming a member, we encourage you to come talk to us after the meeting, or you can go to our website for more information.
Thanks, Terry. Our website, for the record, is leaflinetrails.org.
Should have said that, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. Our work, what we're going to share about today, is really about bringing together the right people, the right information, and taking action together. So Terry and I are talking a little bit with you about how we've got people together and started to touch base with government partners, with those businesses, community members, organizations. And as we entered into our work together, kind of coming out of a 2018 Regional Trails Summit at a community center on Mercer Island, I see a number of you in the room who I know were there in 2018 for that initial kickoff, exploring, hey, is there interest in our region in working together to connect trails, to build more trails, and to make the ones we've already got better and more inclusive? And out of that work, you may recall, we launched as Leafline in 2020. And Gabriel's going to talk a little bit about the Leafline name and brand. You'll learn it is not only the name of the coalition, but the name of the network. And Haley, in between us, is going to talk also about our efforts to develop a map. So again, I just want to emphasize one of the ways that we've been able to build momentum as a coalition with now 60 plus members and about 900 individuals who subscribe to our newsletter or participate in meetings. That's been about getting the right people together and undertaking somewhat ambitious projects together to understand what we need to do as a region to build more trails, build better trails, and really enhance user experience of the Leafline Trails Network. So one of the things that we found really helpful, like all of you, trying to make change during COVID, has been actually taking kind of a distributed approach. It's been unexpectedly amazing to see people, showing up in the images you see on the screen here. We distributed Leafline Trails Coalition signs and asked folks to snap a photo of themselves on a local trail or in a local park, And we were able to string all of those together into a video to try to tell Leafline's story with everybody's voices of the folks who are participating. And in a similar vein, we've been getting great participation through virtual meetings, actually even more people participating via Zoom and kind of checking in over email than we were able to interact with back in 2018 and 2019 when we were asking folks from King, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish counties to make what can be a really arduous journey to get to an in-person meeting. So we're really leaning into virtual meetings and ways to tell stories in more distributed ways to build those partnerships, to build those relationships, and build the connections that we need to address some of the challenges that we face. So when we polled our membership about shared challenges and areas where it would be helpful for the coalition to strategize, funding is by far one of the most common answers. And I know in other sessions that I've done, and even today, there's a lot of discussion about everything from, wow, how do we work with this recreational immunity issue and seek, transportation dollars to, there was a session just before this one about volunteer match hours and sort of all of those factors. So certainly learning about funding, how to get funding, advocating for new streams of funding to kind of grow the pot for regional trails funding is something that we're interested in continuing to do. But there are other challenges that often overlap, and those are things like political support or organizational capacity or information sharing and how are we coordinating. And those are the types of areas where bringing together not only the right people and the right resources, but really having a shared vision can be very helpful to structure our work together. So probably since 2018, the coalition has been really interested in developing some kind of a visual map that says, this is what we're aiming for together. And we were learning from coalitions across the country about that. And in order to get to the map that Haley's going to take us through that captures a 900-mile network of trails to bike, walk, or roll across central Puget Sound, to get there, we really needed to start with characterizing our vision, our values, and we went through a charter process, which is how Terry and I got to know each other. We were both serving on that charter committee where we started to put into words what we wanted this network to look like. Brianna as well. I'm seeing lots of folks in the room who are part of that process. But we kind of came to consensus around a linguistic vision statement that said we want trails to be accessible to people of all ages and abilities, interconnected and usable, equitably distributed, a reliable transportation choice, and connected to green space. And kind of through those statements, you can understand all of the ways in which trails are absolutely very connected with planning efforts, with community advocacy efforts, with all kinds of things related to quality of life. But we had to start somewhere in defining where we were going. And then in order to undertake this mapping effort, we developed a criteria to describe the types of trails that our coalition wanted to focus on. And so in really simple terms, we said trails in the Leafline network are wide, they're off-street, they're generally feasible of being built within about 20 years. We wanted to work on things that could happen. They are multi-use. I know there's been a wealth of presentations today that really highlight how everything from equestrian use to people in motorized wheelchairs to people walking or running or rollerblading, whatever that use is, we're really trying to focus on trails that a lot of people can use for a lot of different purposes. We decided it was really important for these trails to be connected to each other and to destinations, making sure that these are trails that serve a purpose and can really be active parts of people's journey, whether that's for recreation or transportation. As well as, we heard loud and clear that, looking at the state of our network now and where we want it to go, having trails that are paved and graveled was really important to include both some of those like hard packed but soft surface trails, as well as sort of the asphalt connectors that many of us who reside in more urban areas are more familiar with. So we planned to ask you to submit your favorite trail near you, but I do want to give the opportunity for anyone to shout out, like, thinking of trails near you that sort of fit these criteria. I'd love to hear just a couple if you can be loud.
Sound to Olympics Trail.
Sound to Olympics Trail.
Trail.
Centennial Trail, the Great American Rail Trail. Interurban North and Burt Gilman. Foothills Trail. Cushman, yes, thank you. These are actually, all of the trails we've named are part of the Leafline Trails Network. And I wanted to share just briefly, again, in addition to sort of that virtual coordination via quarterly meetings and online summits, we've also been able to make a lot of connections by inviting folks to be together out on the trails. Our goal in this presentation is to sort of peel back the curtain on how we've been able to bring people together to build momentum, to build capacity, to build interest in connecting regional trails across the central Puget Sound area. And you'll see images here of 3 different policy rides: Interurban North, Interurban South, and actually it's just the 2. Those are our interurban rides. We've also been out in South Seattle, in Mount Lake Terrace. Here's an event that we worked with the Wilderness Society to get Representative Rick Larson out on the trails to really educate and inform and have a conversation about the ways that trails are a really essential part of safe transportation in our region. And we formally launched the MAP Vision, which Haley's going to take us into on a way deeper level here. But we launched that in this June, and we're able to get Governor Inslee as well as elected officials and community leaders from around the region to share. We did sort of a correspondent style live Zoom event where you see an image on the screen here of policy advisor John Snyder sort of holding the phone for the governor to address the full coalition. And it was a very pleasant surprise to me and everyone else when, after the governor said hello, he proceeded to get on his bike and address the coalition live from Zoom while biking up a hill on the Sound to Olympics Trail. So these are some images of some of our other speakers, including Diane Iverson, who's the vice chair of the coalition, part of West Sound Cycling Club, Mark Barreca with REI, Christy True, King County Parks, council member Christina Walker with City of Tacoma, and Pierce County Executive Dan Meyer. We've got Snohomish County Executive Summers and Poulsbo Mayor Becky Erickson. This is like pop quiz of how fast can you rattle off all these names with faces. I hope I passed. But we also had Haley talking about the sort of the nitty-gritty of the MAP Vision and some of the analysis that we were able to do with an incredible amount of support from our partners, but also volunteers, including Haley, and especially Haley, who has spent a lot of time on the phone with me on Zoom trying to make this thing work. So that's sort of the people side of things and how we started getting together. I'm going to turn things over to Haley to take us into the MAP portion of today's presentation.
So our MAP Vision started with 2 products in mind, one being an interactive technical map that we can update and share and circulate very quickly and easily, and the other was a very conceptual, pretty, inspirational product that would kind of run adjacent to that interactive map. So those are the 2 products, and then right before we launched in June, we had an aha moment where we realized we were already working with 900 miles of existing and planned trails, and of that 900 miles, 500 were actively open. So therefore, our network is 56% 50% complete. I would call it 60, but you know. So that was exciting, and I'll show you a little bit more. First, let's a little bit of background. So, especially when you're close to it as a cartographer on the daily, and working within teams, it's easy to forget that maps are both an art and a science, and finding that balance, determinant on the product you're trying to create is very important, but easy to forget. They are also political and controversial. You think that you can just pump out a quick map, but that's not the case. You have to be really careful as to how you're depicting it. And then maps are data. And data is forever changing and needing to be updated, and TBD on whether you can procure the data at all. So these are the things that I forget on the daily naively. Someday that might change, but who knows. So, and then also this is the first time the 4-county region has attempted to do this, to compile all of the trail data as a meaningful mode of transportation and work together in collaboration. So, just a reminder as to how many times a day you may use a map. So I'll give you a second to kind of take that inventory in your head.
We could vote by number of fingers of how many
let's
times
do
a
number
day.
of fingers. So how many times a day do you think you use a map?
5, 10.
Yeah, these are trail people.
10.
Looks like a lot of people want more fingers than they have to vote.
Yeah, but it's shocking that I have to break that down for folks. Use maps a lot, man. So this is to get a little woo-woo on us before we get into the details of our product. I've got this lovely quote from Brene Brown. And mapping is not as easy as simply stacking the data on top of data. There's an art and a science on how cartographers prioritize and integrate the data. And they're the most important documents in human history. They give us the tools to store, exchange knowledge about space and place. It's a balance of that art and science. So the process and lessons learned, we are in a unique role as a coalition to kind of facilitate the conversation, but no one owns the data. And so the biggest lesson that I learned was the process and the exercise of negotiating and trust building is significantly more important than the actual product itself. And it would be easy for me to just throw a map together and give it to Claire and call it done. But there's an ethic and a value component to cartography, and it wouldn't be ethical for me to just take the data and run. So therefore, we had to go through this whole process, and and then we also had just a bit about the visionary. So that's another thing, is right now we're at a point where we have our existing conditions collected, and we're trying to discuss as a coalition what the vision is, so feasible within the next 20 years. And so we do want to inspire people to dream big and to not live in like what is typical, but what is possible. However, displaying that on a map can be very controversial. So we definitely have ongoing conversations related to the visionary aspect of our data. So like I said, the map is iterative and ongoing, and we set forth the process and relationships for what it looked like to do this collaboratively. We implemented the working group, the map technical team, and then we had just like one-on-one conversations, a lot of lunches with individual jurisdictions and agencies, bringing them along, explaining our definitions, getting people to negotiate and agree and ultimately trust us to visualize their data. This was kind of the first stab at collecting all of the existing conditions. It was very exciting. It was June 2021. It was like you could feel the energy of everyone was really excited to touch a physical map and put a Post-it on it. And this is where we started, kind of. And other collaborative conversations that we held, kind of on the fly drawing of the map virtually in a full coalition meeting, as well as what are your ideas that are not necessarily point or segment ideas that you have for our regional network. And then the second product outside of the technical interactive map is the conceptual kind of inspirational piece. And here we lift the curtain and to the left, to the left, to the left, that's where we started. It was real squishy. It's not my best work. And to the right, with the help of Gabriel and his team, we have the subway style-esque map. And I think they've got later on we'll have another example of that. Fun thing about the subway style map is it works great if you're a landlocked region. There's a lot of water here, so we had to kind of pivot, and it looks a little different than others. It's not as conceptual as some may want it to be, and that's another thing, is kind of negotiating what we're comfortable with, even artistically. And without further ado, is our technical map. We've got a QR code. We love it if you load it and play with it and check it out. This is the platform on our website where we will be adding in real time the analyses that our TCA is working on, and other kind of gap analyses. Whatever we produce will be uploaded in real time and added to this map. And we didn't get here alone. While it was the first time in the region that we have conducted this exercise, we definitely had other peers nationwide, including Capital Trails Coalition, the Bay Area Trails Collaborative, and Great American Rail Trail. This is their examples of their subway-style maps. And yes, these products were a great kind of example, but it was also the exercise that was critical to kind of see them go through that process and know kind of milestones along the way. And I'm going to pass it to Gabriel.
I can do this.
Here you go.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's been really interesting to learn from Haley and others who worked on this map how, we set out with one product in mind, and literally through hours of conversation on Zoom realized that the angles that we would need to more officially emulate a subway style map just did not make sense when you overlaid it on the really kind of complicated coastlines and Pacific Northwest topography. So super interesting. And as Haley has said, this process of data coordination is really ongoing. And I wanted to note one of the efforts, and actually Julie from the National Park Service is in the room as well as on the slide, speaking at our 2018 summit, is joining the Leafline team through an RTCA capacity grant, really helping to advise us and guide us through a process to develop a gap-filling framework and sort of the next step for analysis. So I think we've got 1,000,001 ideas about what we would like to do next with this data. I know Fred this morning in a session about trails in transit flashed up a map that Parametrics had pulled together showing the Leafline Trails Network and the High Capacity Transit Network in our region. So there's ample opportunities like that to really add resources and convene some conversations about where gaps are located. And so I wanted to share this to say, stay tuned. We're going to have a town hall on November 17th, I believe, in the afternoon, really sharing in more detail the results from a survey that we just closed. We got about 100 responses from folks weighing in about what criteria should be used, and also trying to grapple with prioritization. What factors are most important to use to capture gaps. And so we did want to ask, and again, this is going to be like popcorn style around the room, but when you think about filling gaps in a trails network, what pops to mind as some of the most important criteria to look at?
Potential number of users.
Yeah, potential number of users. Number of miles connected.
Underserved populations.
Yeah, equity and underserved populations that will be served by a project or by closing a gap.
Transportation connections to the bus lines, ports, various community
Yeah, absolutely. So destinations like community centers, as well as connections for transportation purposes and connections between trails and transit, ports, ferries, things like that. Yes, these are absolutely along the lines of what we're trying to work through, as well as one area that hasn't been said in the room yet is readiness and feasibility. How do we as a coalition, when we're talking about kind of drawing big circles on the map saying, hey, there's a gap here. We'd love to support conversations and planning as a coalition to close that gap. How do we begin to characterize readiness and feasibility for projects that our government partners have? So wanted to do a brief interjection here about some of the work that's unfolding right now in real time and get some of your ideas about criteria for gap filling. But again, just want to really shout out Haley, Terry, Brianne. There's a lot of folks who volunteered a lot of time to help us develop that initial map. I really do encourage you to explore it on your phone and join the coalition. Help us make this map better and use it for planning purposes. So I think we're now going to pass things over to Gabriel, who's going to guide us through some of the ways that the Leafline brand is out on the trails and ready for the community to engage with.
Yeah, so I'm going to take us back to 2018 when it was just the Regional Trails Coalition. King County Parks was looking to brand the regional trails here in King County. And, it was like a year-long effort of community engagement where we went out, did intercept surveys with trail visitors, talked to trail advocates, talked to some of the new coalition members. And I think most importantly, we really wanted to get to the question of, sort of why trails, what these trails meant to people. And not just for people that were on trails, but for people that didn't know they existed. So my team spent some time at shopping malls, at transit centers, and just talking to people if they knew about the trail system. And if they didn't, we'd give them a brief overview and then ask them, like, how is this valuable to you? How would you use them? So that this Leafline logo came from over a year of this sort of community engagement. And while a number of brand designs came out of sort of that engagement, this one was one that we felt that represented in our stakeholders in this process, the coalition advocates, really represented this sort of living connection. That the trail system is something that is always growing, that it's connected, that it's connecting communities, and the brand itself needed to show how various parts of the system can connect to each other to create sort of this living, vibrant whole. So once the brand itself was developed, the coalition, along with King County Parks, used those brand guidelines to create the leaflinetrails.org website. And actually, King County Parks was going to implement that brand, but it so happened that it happened right when the pandemic hit. So there was other sort of top-line messaging that it kind of would have got lost in. But the coalition really wanted to run with it and get that brand out there. So we created the coalition website, coordinated with various representatives of the Ford County Coalition membership, and created a launch video that you can find on the site. And then began that change to unite the system under this one brand. So part of the conversation that we were having around why branding the trail system was, what does this brand, what does it do for trail visitors? How can that brand increase awareness? How can it increase enjoyment, a sense of safety, and the overall experience of people that come to this Trails Network? And our goal at King County Parks had always been to benefit the users on the ground. So we wanted to assure visitors that they are on a thoughtfully constructed, holistic system. And this brand can help shape and define that and the experience that people have when they're out on the trails. So, as you've seen, the Leafline Trails Network is composed of many different jurisdictions, many different managers. There's a variety of jurisdictions out there. And while somebody is traveling down one trail, they might encounter a lot of different brands, a lot of different signage that's out there. And the logos, identifying markers, And one of the things that really, for me, brings this into reality is the East Rail. And if you're not familiar with the East Rail, it is a 42-mile trail that starts in Snohomish County in Woodinville and then goes in the north and falls to the east shore of Lake Washington through Kirkland, Redmond, Bellevue, and eventually will end in Renton in the south. So just in the section of East Rail from Kirkland to Redmond, trail visitors will encounter, a variety of brands and logos. The East Rail itself, being a huge investment, has its own coalition of East Rail partners. That's also part of the Leafline Coalition. And so it's gone through its own branding efforts. The East Rail has its own brand. The Kirkland Corridor, the Cross Kirkland Corridor has its own brand. And then we have logos of trail managers. So we have, cities of Redmond and Kirkland, King County Parks, and then finally the Leafline brand. So how do all of these different identities serve to increase and not confuse the experience of trail visitors out there? So we're currently working through challenges like this one, creating wayfinding signage that needs to show several elements: trail system identity, local trail name, city name, King County Parks, and then the network identity itself of the Leafline Trails Network. So the position of these elements within various signage needs to reflect their relative importance to users as they travel along their journey through the Leafline. And the brand itself, the Leafline brand, serves as sort of a trust marker that lets people know that they are part of a much larger network. So there are some other things that we need to consider when we're creating those Leafline Trail brand identity markers. We wanted branding to be easy for all partners to implement. We wanted them to be large enough and a strong enough visual marker, but simple enough and easy enough to produce that they fit in with other logos that people might find when they're out there. We also want them to be, easy to install, visually appealing, and where possible able to marry with other signage to reduce sign clutter, and then they can be used as part of that wider strategy. So one of the ways that King County Parks has done this is on our gateway signs. So these are our King County Blue gateway signs, and you can find them at the entrance to most of our major trails. We added the Leafline logo to these gateway markers up there on the right in a way to introduce that brand concept to visitors as they come onto the trail. And then the third panel on the right and the bottom is an example of when we have a various partner that we co-manage with in a way to show those partners on there as well. The other way is by adding these Leafline medallions on some of our minor ID signs. So we have a lot of these minor ID signs that are sporadically placed throughout trails to let people know where they are. And using a smaller ID sign like that, it's actually, I think we did testing of the 6-inch one, and by bicycle it was a little small, so we actually went with an 8-inch by 8-inch sign. And those ones can fit in with various jurisdiction signage. With 175 miles of regional trails that we manage, it's more cost effective for us to do a smaller sign like this than to redo a bunch of different signs. And then as people travel down the trail, those visual identity markers sort of create a question in their heads that we need to answer. And the way that we've done that is through our kiosks. So we rebranded all of our kiosks on regional trails to have the Leafline Trails Network, the logo. One side of these kiosks shows people where they are within the system. Another side shows them where that trail exists within the system. There's one side that has more of a blurbs about other trails that they could visit. And then finally we added a fourth side that shows the Leafline Trails Network, all 4 counties, and talks a little bit about the coalition. The other thing that we did was we rebranded our Leafline Trails print map. And this is a great map. It's really popular. We give them out through all of the King County Parks libraries, through Seattle Libraries, REI. We go through a lot of them. And so we added a panel in there that talked about the Leafline Trails Coalition, the network itself, and then of course rebranded it all with the Leafline brand. So lastly, I think being part of a coalition for King County Parks has been a real benefit. You know, us as a managing jurisdiction, we have the opportunity to collaborate not only on signage, but other projects, policy rides, design and communication, and including videos and the website, and of course all this amazing data that Haley's working on.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think there's a really exciting opportunity for those of you who work for agencies in the Central Puget Sound region, or you're a community member who would love to see your local trail kind of integrated into the 4-county network, to say, hey, right now a lot of this work is happening through conversations and connections that we're able to make to, when new trails come online, for example, include the Leafline Trails Network brand. And the goal overall, as Gabriel said, is really having a 4-county network that looks and feels and is intuitive for users to navigate, to get around, or to connect with nature. And so I think that the insights that we wanted to leave you with before we transition to Q&A, it's just there, I hope, lots of opportunities to integrate this into your work, whether you are a potential partner or member in our area, or want to see something similar happen in your part of the state. And the first being, as we've learned, is that data matters. There's a lot of potential to tell stories in a visual way through maps, and can make change in that direction. Second, in banding together, you can do more, right? There's power in collaboration, not only from having more voices saying the same thing, but also lots of voices saying different things, and in learning from each other and different approaches. And last, as I've alluded to, and Terry has as well, there's ample membership and partnership opportunities to get involved with Leafline. The coalition is no one person or no one organization. It's really the sum of everyone's ideas and contributions. We're really just trying to kind of hold space for these conversations to happen. So we'd love to have you involved. And with that, thank you, and hopefully there are some questions for us. Yeah.
That four-sided kiosk that showed the different maps and so on, those are not inexpensive. Does Leafline have a budget line and so on that creates those itself, or do they take it out of other people's parks and rec funds?
Sure, so I'll repeat the question and then hand it to Gabriel. But the question was about the kiosks that we showed, those four-sided things. They can be expensive, so is the coalition paying for those? Are our partners paying for them?
Yeah, so those kiosks are built by King County Parks, on King County Parks trails by our trail crew.
I think I would just add something to the answer, in that, Leafline is not trying to set standards for any government. Every government's going to have a different standard for kiosk. This one's got a certain cost associated with it. Other counties may have different kiosks that have lesser or more cost. And so I think what we want to do is provide the package of materials so that they can go populate their kiosks with the same set of information, so that Snohomish, Pierce, Kitsap, whoever's engaged in trying to get information out onto the trail system can go to that same package, that same bundle, and be able to put it into their kiosks, independent of what that individual kiosk may cost. Yeah.
I think one of the benefits of the Leafline coordination and partnership is King County is really out in front, helping really get that brand out there, and building these kiosks and sharing their work with the other counties to implement as we can, right? So in Pierce County, we're looking at a slightly different implementation, but as we renovate trailheads and signage, taking what King County has done and right sizing it for our projects, and really getting the benefit of all the good work that Gabriel's done and his team has done, and using what we can in our signage as it works. So it's not one size fits all, which is really a benefit to, I think, all the partners.
Regarding the 900-mile goal, this is a work in progress. There are lots of partners we don't have yet. They're probably key to the overall effort. Do you see in the future an effort to essentially potentially reassess that 900-mile figure?
Let's take that one.
You want to go?
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, so I think the 900 number is really based primarily on jurisdictional plans. So it really comes from each of the 4 counties, the plans that they have, and sort of sets up what's existing and what's planning that goes into our data framework. So that number will change over time as those plans get updated and visionary projects that were maybe beyond a 20-year horizon start to form up and become more real and perhaps have some planning funding associated with them and maybe take that next step of being included in the next round of planning for them. So yes, it will change and evolve over time as sort of these projects get teed up and able to move forward, I would say.
And it's too soon to say what timeframe you think 900 miles could be achieved.
Yeah, I mean, at that level of analysis, I think it's even tough for jurisdictions to know these kinds of things. Like 20 years is just sort of it's a starting point for the conversation, right? I mean, I think we just sort of had to set a limit so that we knew what we were working with as far as data. And that was definitely an interesting conversation as we talked to each of the partners, King's, the Homish Pierce, and Kitsap, because each of them had a little bit of a different perspective on that as to what was feasible from a trail building perspective and what was kind of beyond that 20-year horizon.
I'll add to that too.
Yeah.
So anybody who's worked with trail data knows that it is not traditionally, it's just recently being considered a meaningful mode of transportation. And so the trail data that we have is definitely piecemeal. So the 900 existing and planned trails, the 900 miles, is, like Terry said, our starting point. But I think that for me, it's really exciting to see it all in one spot, kind of herded together for Leafline volunteers to maintain it, so that we never have to go start from scratch again, which is a pet project of mine, I think, but definitely excited to maintain and continue to update, and not just the existing and planned trails, whatever mileage it will end at, but also the additional analyses and information we get from jurisdictions.
Yeah.
I had 2 questions I was curious about. One, do you foresee in the future any possibility of adding any of the other counties surrounding that core group of 4? And then the other question is, have you run into any problems developing trail corridors when they pass through ag land? And I'm thinking in Sonoma County of 2 past projects, one where it was successful, one where we're still roadblocked.
Great question. So starting with the question about geography, in conversation with folks, I know I hear often, hey, could you add Thurston County? Hey, could you add Skagit County? What about Kittitas? Maybe be the whole state. And what we have kind of undertaken so far feels quite ambitious. There's 900 miles of trails, and as the other question kind of alluded to, perhaps through our gap filling analysis, we might identify additional potential projects or not so much projects, but areas where there are gaps, where it sure would be great to work together to create some kind of access for local communities. And at this point, we've really defined ourselves as a 4-county initiative. And we also hear loud and clear that kind of that coordination with other partners, stakeholders, whether those are, coalitions on the Olympic Peninsula or government that, for example, Snohomish County is really actively participating in initiatives looking at connections to the north. I think that's incredibly valuable to make sure that there is that kind of broader information sharing and inspiration that can hopefully yield even bigger regional connections. But for now, we're definitely focused on that 4-county area. And then remind me of the second question.
The second question was, have you run into any challenges in implementing or developing trails through ag land?
I would just say that we are not really in the implementation or project management side of it, right? We want to be the venue through which conversations happen and bringing, stakeholders and jurisdictions and community members into one space. But the nitty-gritty of how things happen from a trail planning and trail building perspective, we really leave that to the experts. That's going to be, the trail managers at the county level. If there's cities that endeavor to do those projects, those people would really be the best people to handle those. I think what we provide is a space for those folks to learn from one another, right? So we often have opportunities for people to bring presentations. You know, we have our quarterly meetings, we have our annual summit where people bring unique challenges or unique projects or things to the table that may provide an insight for another jurisdiction that's trying to handle a similar problem. So I think that's kind of what we provide, is the space to learn from one another.
As Terry said, I just want to add one more piece, which is Washington's got a lot of working forests, and I'm not so much aware of agricultural land problems. But for example, on the Kitsap Peninsula, there's efforts underway to create a trail connection through a working forest, and there may be opportunities, as Terry said, to share insights and common challenges or ways that we've confronted them to hopefully understand. You know, I'm sure others have encountered very similar challenges, and there might be opportunity to learn from each other and see what works. Yeah, Leanne.
You guys talked about data coordination and science comment on that. And I know it's a heavy lift just to get data in one place, and from a jurisdiction standpoint, it's, you know, getting that to different entities, contributing that data isn't always simple either. And we see in our CEO statewide database, I know the Leafline database at the county level, we're trying to update ours with our PROS plan update. How do you see that update process for Leafline? And I ask it selfishly because we're trying to figure out how to update and continue to update, right? So it's not a static thing. And so how do you see that happening for Leafline moving forward? In addition to the visionary 900 miles maybe changing, how do you see a regular schedule for updating that data, or what will that look like?
You can just email me, Bran. We have not discussed a schedule. I will say, as continuing my volunteer efforts, I definitely, we need to have that conversation, because that's the main charge that I would like to take up in the years moving forward. So we'll discuss that offline. But for now, you can just email me.
I would say, since we are figuring out this process for the first time as a region, this is an area where asking peer coalitions has been very helpful. And I know I had a conversation a few months ago with my counterpart with the Bay Area Trails Collaborative about their process. Once they developed this database of trails, how did they maintain it, make sure it's current? And what we had started to talk about is maybe on an annual basis, meeting with jurisdictions to request updates. It sounds like they've got a committee that functions as a version of our Map Vision working group that reviews these things and submits changes, and those happen annually. But again, they're a bit different in that they've got a GIS staff component from Rails to Trails Conservancy. And again, I just want to underscore that what's happening here is really partner and volunteer supported. And so the goal is just bringing folks together and making this a usable tool for coalition needs. And that's going to happen through a lot of figuring it out.
I think the other thing to say too is that the hope, we haven't gone there yet, right? So we won't know till we get there, because it is kind of an organic process as we all figure this out together. But the hope is that the heavy lift was already done, right? It's the data standardization piece that was really hard, getting various GIS databases to communicate with one another and all in one place. That was the heavy lift. I think the hope is that update process is more of I think we've said it, an annual check-in. Tell us what's changed, what got completed, what's been added to planning documents since then, and send us your layers so that we can get those included in the new, the new map online. So the hope is that it would be a much less time-intensive process than it was up to this point, because it was. And I have to give a lot of credit to each of the county jurisdictions that participated in that process. They gave a lot of time to us to work through this actively, in meetings, after hours. It was a non-trivial amount of time that they contributed to us, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, a lot of those meetings even included just to kind of some insight into the data itself was, Brianne would hand us her existing data, And we would go through and be like, this alignment looks weird. Is this how it actually goes? And Brianna would step by step tell us, or Brianne, excuse me, I'm sorry, step by step tell us exactly what that alignment actually looks like, because no one had the time or resources to really finesse it. And if we were going to do it, the big lift, we were going to do it right. And so, yeah, I think you had one more thing to add on that. I don't remember.
It'll come to you.
Okay, here.
Any other questions? I'll leave it there. Thanks, y'all.
I'm gonna punch this thing, right? To stop recording.